Ladies and gentlemen, our first speaker has served in a range of command and staff positions to include Commander, 4th Brigade Combat Team Airborne, 25th Infantry Division, and Commanding General, the United States Army Central. He now serves as Commanding General, United States Army Forces Command. It is a pleasure to introduce General Michael X. Garrett. Sir, thank you for joining us today, taking time out of your busy schedule to join us for the Maneuver Warfighting Conference.
Hey, thanks for the introduction, and hope everybody out there, can see me and can hear me. Want to apologize for being late, so I'll knock out some push-ups. We won't all do it at the same time, but it is really a pleasure for me to join all of my maneuver leaders, allies, partners, and warfighters. This is something that I've been looking forward to. Is that I was disappointed that we had to do this event virtually, because, and especially those of you that know me know how much
experiencing some technical difficulties.
How important personal interaction is in the way that I lead. But one thing I often say and think about, especially over the last 2 years, is that we need to make sure that we capture and hold on to the lessons that we've learned over the last 2 years about distributed operations. And whether or not COVID endures, we certainly are a little bit better because technology allows us to stay connected. Now this particular sentiment does not apply to battalion level and below formations where, in my view, physical presence is non-negotiable. But there are occasions where I'm grateful for these virtual capabilities that we have, and this is one of those times. So I'll try not to lament the fact that I find myself speaking virtually at the Maneuver Warcom for the second time in a row, not due to COVID this time, but simply due to competing priorities. And because I want this conversation to feel as personal as possible, I will forego the use of a slideshow so that you can at least look me in the eyes while I share a few of my thoughts and then move along to some of your questions. While getting ready to speak with all of you, I took a long, hard look at the conference's agenda and thought about the very important and challenging topics that you've been tackling. Topics such as modernization, emerging threats in the Pacific, and the future of war. And I thought to myself, what can the Forces Commander contribute to your discussions that would be unique and even more importantly relevant? And as you might guess, my answer has a lot to do with what ForceCom does for our Army, in the sense that ForceCom takes things that are theoretical and makes them real. Don't misinterpret my phrasing as demeaning or flippant, because I only say that as a way to simply acknowledge ForceCom's important role within the Army. Outside and above ForceCom, we have leaders who form the right strategies for our Army, academics who develop the right doctrine for our forces, COCOMs and the Joint Staff determine the right requirements to protect America and our interests, and modernization initiatives in order to keep us relevant. But as all of you know, it's not until these plans and ideas flow down into ForceCom through echelons of command down to the squad, the crew, and team levels that strategy, doctrine, requirements, and modernization become real readiness. And in that spirit, real readiness is what I want to talk to you about today. Because many of us maneuver leaders will find ourselves in positions where we are charged with translating theoretical plans and ideas into something real that our soldiers on the ground can see, touch, understand, experience, train for, and act on. In other words, our Army strategy, doctrine, requirements, and modernization will only ever be as good as our soldiers and our lowest echelon formations. And in turn, our soldiers and lowest echelons formations will only be as good as their leaders' ability to translate theory into practice. A few weeks ago, I had the privilege to travel down to Fort Benning and participate in a ceremony at the National Infantry Museum, where Brigadier General Larry Burris and Command Sergeant Major Derek Garner presented my father with the Spirit of the Infantry Award. My father enlisted in 1959 and served 35 years. as many of you have heard me say often, he is the greatest non-commissioned officer I have ever known. He earned a Silver Star in Vietnam and rose through the ranks to ultimately serve as a 3-star Command Sergeant Major in Korea. But most notably and most memorable for me is when he was my division Command Sergeant Major in the 24th ID. And some of you may remember that time, General Schwarzkopf was the division commander. Well, my dad, finally retired, settled in Columbus, Georgia, after serving as the Fort Benning Command Sergeant Major. And what the Spirit of Infantry ceremony gave me beyond, a very, very special opportunity and chance to join my sisters in honoring my father's service, it was also an opportunity for me to pour over lots of information that I quite frankly hadn't seen before. Every file, letter, and article that we could find from his career in the Army. And in particular, an interview he gave late in his career stood out to me about Private Garrett's, Specialist Garrett, Sergeant E5 Garrett, what his priorities were as a young soldier assigned to an infantry squad. And he said there were only 3 things he needed to be concerned with as a soldier. They were learning to shoot his M1 rifle correctly, learning how to be a member of a Browning automatic rifle crew, and learning how to be a member of a 50 caliber machine gun crew. Those were the only things that he concerned himself with, because those were the only things that were going to keep him and his teammates alive, and the only things that were going to help accomplish his mission. And what I realized reading back over my dad's words was that he was talking about mastering the fundamentals long before I started talking about it as a FORSCOM commanding general. The world will always change, as will the environments in which we operate and the technology we use. But what will never change is the foundation of what allows our force to fight and win, and that's the soldiers who have mastered the fundamentals of their warfighting tasks. I'm talking about simple but crucial skills like shooting and maintaining their weapon, knowing and following their unit's battle drills and SOPs, rendering first aid, communicating up and down the chain of command, and being disciplined, trained, and fit at the point of contact with the enemy. Take another look at the name of this conference, Modernization for Large-Scale Combat Operations in the Pacific. The only reason any of us can afford to have a conversation about modernizing our force is because we trust our soldiers to first master the fundamentals and then sustain that mastery. The only reason we can afford to have a conversation about large-scale combat operations is because we trust our soldiers to first master their ability to fight and win what will be for them close combat at the point of contact. And the only reason we can afford to have a conversation about potential operations in the Indo-PACOM theater is because we trust our soldiers to first be able to shoot, move, and communicate anywhere and anytime. And the reason that we trust our soldiers' ability to execute the basics is because we train relentlessly, over and over and over again. And that's how my dad became an expert with his rifle, and it's the reason I know, if needed, our soldiers today can and will win a large-scale combat operation in the Pacific, or as current events would lead us, Europe or anywhere else. So what I'm trying to tell you is that the little things matter. Training in the United States Army Maneuver Forces, training is in the United States Army Maneuver Forces DNA. And I'll ask that while you're thinking about the important theoretical ways in which we will evolve our force for the next fight, you also discuss the ways in which you will translate strategy and ideas into real readiness. Some of you may have attended or at least tuned in during this past October's AUSA annual meeting in Washington, D.C. for FORSCOM's contemporary military forum about the balance between readiness and modernization. Lieutenant General Jim Rainey, the Army G357, Lieutenant General Eric Kurilla, the 18th Airborne Corps Commander, and the UK's Major General Mike Keating, our 3rd Armor Corps DCG for support, joined in to help connect the dots between many of the Army's big picture challenges and how we turn them into real readiness into our formations. Additionally, we were also joined by Dr. Chris Preble, the panel civilian expert from the Atlantic Council, who we brought in to help us be creative and explicit in achieving the readiness balance. And if Dr. Preble were listening to this conversation today, I know every time I have used the phrase real readiness, he would very rightly be demanding the answer to a very simple question: ready for what? And I hope many of you have been asking the same thing, because it is a very important question and one without an obvious answer. My answer, which lacks specificity, is that the Army has to be ready to fight and win our nation's wars. This is the only reason we exist as an Army. But which wars will we be expected to fight? Against whom? When will they happen, and for how long? Where? How will we define winning? I mean, think about, the reason that I was late today. I was talking to division and corps commanders and the Army senior leadership about our preparations to meet Commander UCOM and Commander United States Army Africa Europe requests for forces. Even if we have an idea of where the most likely and most dangerous courses of action may send us, ultimately we do not know and cannot know these answers. And that's where training becomes very, very important, because a maneuver force that is ready gives, like we are doing today, gives the nation options and decision space in the face of uncertainty. And to preserve this decision space, every maneuver leader, has to be careful to not make the wrong assumption about or overestimate the readiness of our forces. We cannot assume we'll have the time to train and deploy a ground force, whether in competition or in conflict. We cannot assume we will be familiar with the terrain. We cannot assume the survivability of our command post maneuver formations or fighting platforms upon the first salvo of enemy artillery into the next conflict. And we cannot assume we know where we will fight next. Today's conference is focused on the Pacific, and as we have all watched recent news, we've now sent additional units into Eastern Europe. So we cannot afford to orient our sights only along one theater. Soldiers have to be ready to fight and win anywhere, and you get that by prioritizing time and resources for training at the lowest echelons. I say this because I really do believe our military strategy, doctrine, requirements, and modernization initiatives are doing a great deal to help us clarify and really answer the question of ready for what. What I want you to take away from my comments this morning is that although there will always be surprises when it comes to fighting and winning the nation's wars, one of the most dangerous assumptions you and I could make is that mastery is present within each of our crews, teams, and squads. We cannot simply assume or hope mastery exists in our formations. Rather, mastery has to be something that we know exists for a fact, because we see it, we measure it, and we validate it with our own eyes. Because if we make that assumption, and if we're wrong, then that's where we will start losing the decision space that we provide for our leaders. I've told some of you, over the last couple of years that, I don't make assumptions when it comes to our soldiers' readiness. And I do not assume that leaders all the way down the chain of command are experts in all of the things that contribute to real readiness of their units. Instead, I seek to ensure our training meets very high standards because I personally observe, ask questions, and engage. And this is not a slight against many of you and your fellow leaders, but rather an acknowledgement that our Army was focused for 20 years, or our Army's focus for 20 years was not on large-scale combat operations, but a different kind of conflict. And that is why your conversations over these 3 days will make an impact. And rather than simply assume training, maintenance, and mastery of the fundamentals is happening, I invest my time, energy, and personal example into verifying readiness with my own eyes and my own ears. But I can't do it alone. So I'm here to ask for your help. Every one of the maneuver leaders in this audience, especially our first sergeants and command sergeants major, may be an expert in something that your subordinates have yet to experience, let alone master. They need you physically present in the field, at PT, in the motor pool, and anywhere that they're building real readiness, because your experience matters, and it matters more than you know. You will help notice, correct, and teach the things that they are not yet attuned to. And likewise, I know every one of you will reach out to and rely on your own leaders and mentors to better inform you on the way that you train your formations. I told you I don't make assumptions, but there's another thing I never find myself doing. I don't worry about our Army, and I don't worry about the readiness of our soldiers, and I do not worry about the next fight. And that is entirely because of the quality people and leaders that we recruit, retain, and develop throughout the Army. You know, I sleep well every night because I know our troops are in the right hands. And I want to thank you, your teams, and your families for your commitment to real readiness today and real readiness for many years to come. You know, I was 30 minutes late for this session, and I was 30 minutes late because we were walking through a number of options that provide decision space for our Army senior leaders. And I tell you what, we can do that because at the point of contact, our troops are ready. You know, I go to most NTC, JRTC rotations, and I tell you what I've observed over the last 3 years. When I took this job, we were not, quite frankly, we were not very good at the point of contact. We were not experts with our weapons. We were not expert in our individual MOS skills. Our soldiers were not as confident. And our units at echelon needed a lot of work on large-scale combat operations. You know, we were very good at counterinsurgency, but we're not very good at fighting, you know, this next fight. But I tell you what, over the last 3 years, with your focus on winning at the point of contact, your focus on gaining real lethality at our tank crews, our platoons, our squads, our companies and battalions is evident to me every time I go out to Fort Irwin or Fort Polk. I tell you, our battalions today are lethal, and that's all of them. Our armor brigades, our infantry brigades, our striker brigades, and that's because of your focus. And I tell you, the options that we were able to provide to Army senior leaders, I was able to do with great confidence, because I know what the level of readiness is in our formations. You know, there are some things that we're going to learn about deploying. You know, we're asking units that don't deploy, like the 82nd or 18th Airborne Corps units, to deploy, but we're going to get better at that too. But the bottom line is, because of your focus and because of your efforts, our Army is in very, very good shape today. You know, there are some things that I'm concerned about, and you know, I'm concerned about, you know, our ability to maintain sufficient forces to meet our directed readiness table requirements, our global force management allocation plan requirements, to meet our modernization goals and requirements, and then to make sure that we're taking care of our soldiers and our families. You know, we're trying to do all of those right now, and I tell you, there is a very, very fine line in terms of our ability to do all of those things to standard. So anyways, thanks again for allowing me to join you all this morning. This is a very valuable engagement for me, and I just want you to know how much I appreciate your time, especially since I wasted 30 minutes of it, and your attention. I want Pat Donahoe and his team down there at Fort Benning to know how much I appreciate, you know, the work that they put into this forum. So I'll stop there, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thanks, sir. We appreciate your comments and your time today. We understand competing demands and no worries on our end. So I'd like to start with a question from the in-person attendees. Throughout the Maneuver Warfighter Conference, we've discussed increasing speed and lethality of the modern battlefield with the proliferation of unmanned vehicles, AI, and long-range fires. what do you think the greatest current challenge is that is facing the maneuver force in this environment, sir?
Yeah, so here's Garrett's greatest challenge, and that is, trying to see, the near future, how we transition from the way that we fight today, and how, artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, and some of our other modernization efforts are going to change the way that we fight in the future. I understand the concepts, and there are some incredible capabilities out there. 18th Airborne Corps, in my view, has been leading the Army. They really have been leading the Army, I think, in terms of their use of artificial intelligence. Their focus right now over the last couple of years has been on targeting. But we're also looking at other ways, to use artificial intelligence in our planning and in our operations. And then, the new systems, that we are fielding, that is going to, I think, take some time. And I think the challenge for, our leaders out there, just like today, right? So think about what we're doing today. Think about, the demand on units today. And that's not going to go away. I don't think what's happening, right now is a one-off. I think this is, kind of indicative of what the future holds for our Army. And so, what I spend a lot of time thinking about is, what is that right balance? What do we have to have available to fight and win our nation's wars? And where can we assume risk, or where do we assume risk to keep our modernization efforts on track?
Thank you, sir. Another question from the audience. As we move to a division-centric Army, how do you envision BCTs fighting in the future in multi-domain operations?
Yeah, so it's really two different questions. Our transition to multi-domain operations, and then moving to a division-centric force, which we're doing right now. I've tried to stop talking about brigade combat teams, because brigade combat teams, especially this fight, brigade combat teams are enabled by division headquarters and all of the other division enablers to support that fight. We have made good progress, I think, over the last couple of years, thinking about and exercising, our division headquarters through warfighter exercises. Over the last couple of years, most of the divisions, and because you had divisions that had most of their division at home station, they were able to apply, maybe not the entire division headquarters against a CTC rotation, but certainly their TACs, their TAC CPs, to gain some division level warfighting experience as our units, our brigades are training. So I think we're on a good path. But the challenge, and this goes back to again, balancing and managing our modernization efforts. We have been experimenting with the replacement for Command Post of the Future, CPOF, since I've been in this job. CPCE is, what's going to replace it. And, I can go to 3 corps, and they're all using a little bit differently, to kind of manage the operations process. I can go to, the 3 corps. Hell, I can go to all 5 of the corps in the Army, but you can go to the 3 corps in FORSCOM. And, they're all, utilizing the tools that we provide them to manage the intel warfighting function, the log warfighting function, a little bit differently. And so standardizing our CPs is going to be important to our divisions gaining greater capability to fight. We have a pilot that we are beginning here soon with one of our penetration divisions, 1st Cavalry Division, and that is on forming a division cavalry squadron. So we're going to work our way through that. So division as a unit of action is kind of where we're going. As you look at, what we're doing in Europe, there are 2 Corps headquarters over there right now. You got 5th Corps over there, and you got 18th Airborne Corps, and that's how we're gonna fight as well.
Thanks, sir. The Secretary of the Army has talked about the importance of putting the Army on a sustainable strategic path. What has FORCECOM done to help achieve this with the force, sir?
Yeah, I think provide, honest, assessments to Army senior leaders, again, on, FORCECOM's ability to meet our directed readiness table and gift map requirements. Those are no fail. Our ability to meet, our support and our modernization, requirements. And then, balancing that against all of our people first activities and taking care of the force. I mean, that's really, what we spend a lot of time on here at Forces Command. And I'll tell you, there really is not a lot of room for error in all of that. And I think over the next, few months, we're going to learn a lot about, how much slack is in the system based on, what we're doing now and potentially what we may be asked to do, in the coming months.
Thank you, sir. Last question from Fort Benning. You mentioned that you do not assume that unit leaders are experts at building real readiness. Do you think they should be, and how do you recommend that we get better at this, sir?
Well, I think TRADOC's done a great job. I was I'm previewing this. I should have done it at the pre-command course the other day, but I failed. But I tell you what TRADOC and CAC are doing to modernize our CCC POIs is I think going to be really, really important. And I am all in on this distance learning requirement that we're going to place on all of our captains prior to their attending the maneuver or their career course. I see this as an opportunity to have battalion and brigade level leader professional development programs that help get our lieutenants prepared to go to the CCC. But the other thing I'm really excited about, and I know that the MCoE or the COEs do not brief General Martin until sometime in April on what they're going to do with this additional time that they have. But I think that is going to be very, very important to long-term mastery at all echelons, but starting at the captain. So to answer the question, I think what TRADOC is doing is very, very important. I also think that our focus over the last 3 years of individual excellence, small unit mastery and lethality, and again over 3 years we've been able to work our way up to our battalion level formations. I don't know who's going to replace me, but one of the things that I will share with him or her is that now we probably do need to start looking hard at our brigades and how we help coach them into multi-echelon training. As I look right now, battalions are in some cases being held back because their brigades are figuring it out, and that's okay. The training centers are the place to do that. Here's what I would tell all of you though about assumptions, and I tell you, this hit me a couple of years ago because I came in here when I did my commander's estimate on Forces Command and where I should probably focus my efforts. I had to make some assumptions about what people knew and where expertise in our formation lied, and I tell you, I was wrong. I was really wrong. I thought that battalion and brigade commanders, just based on their experience, would know training management, would know maintenance management, and I was wrong. And again, it's not their fault. They've done everything that we've asked them to do for the last 20 years. But what I have now is I have brigade commanders in some formations, some of our armor formations, I got brigade commanders and brigade command sergeants major, that have to hang out in the motor pool because they are, kind of where the real experience, expertise, and knowledge exists in their formations. And so now they become, the primary trainers. And I've been talking to division and corps commanders about this, for the last year about, validating, and I mentioned it in my opening remarks, but validating, the level of expertise that's in your formations. And don't make any assumptions about, how much exists and where it exists in your formation. So that's been one of the big revelations for me.
So again, we appreciate your time and taking time out of your busy schedule to join us here at the Maneuver Warfighter Conference. Thanks, sir.
All right. Again, hey, sorry, everybody. I mean, I got some lifelong friends that are there, and I would have loved to, have seen you and spend some time with you. But thanks for allowing me to talk to you today, and I look forward to hearing from you in the near future. Thank you all very, very much.